on-field celebration at Penn State last Saturday was the culmination of a nearly flawless football game by the Wolverines, a methodical destruction of the Nittany Lions. The players' joy was matched by the exuberance of their fans, who made the trip to Happy Valley, and the team gleefully acknowledged them after the final seconds ticked away. The victory catapulted the Wolverines to #1 in the nation, and now the challenge, the expectations, and the pressure becomes even greater. Now they are not just playing for the Big Ten title and a trip to the Rose Bowl, but for the first time in a long time, for the national championship. Today, sandwiched between the emotional win over Penn State and the all-important game against Ohio State, is a trip to Madison to play the somewhat dangerous Badgers. A look at the Wolverines and Wisconsin coming up. Hello, everyone. I'm Don Shane. Here we go. Michigan's #1 in one poll. It's been a while since they've been #1 in any poll. And in the past, when they've reached that lofty status, they have lost and blown it. Dave Llewellyn takes a look back at Michigan being #1 in the polls.
Michigan has won more games than any other college football team, but the school's last national championships came following undefeated 1947 and 1948 seasons. All-Americans Bump Elliott and Bob Chappius were the stars of those teams. The Wolverines have been #1 during the season several times since then, most recently in 1990. Michigan was voted into the top spot 4 games into the season, but it was a short stay. The controversial non-call in the end zone against the Spartans on a 2-point conversion try resulted in a 28-27 defeat for the Wolverines. Despite that disappointment, Michigan did go on to tie for the Big Ten championship. Bo Schembechler's teams were consistently ranked among the nation's best. In 1976, the Wolverines held the #1 ranking for 8 weeks before being upset at Purdue. The following season, Rick Leach and the Wolverines took the #1 ranking to Minneapolis. The Golden Gophers shocked Michigan by shutting them out 16-0.
And here's your first play. Pressure coming. Sack. It is Glenn Steele.
The smashing victory over Penn State last week convinced sports writers to vote the Wolverines #1 in the Associated Press poll. It's made for an exciting week in Ann Arbor.
It feels real good, you know. I mean, it's a really exciting feeling. And, you know, just, you know, it's great.
This is the first time since I've been here that we've been ranked #1. I mean, guys probably don't know how to respond to it. I think what we're doing is basically putting it out of our minds. I mean, all we have to do is play Wisconsin. That's all we can really think about.
Lloyd Carr has reason to be a bit wary about playing in Madison. For one thing, the Badgers are a pretty darn good football team, and they've got Rose Bowl dreams of their own. Camp Randall is about as hostile a place as there is for visiting teams, and there's also some history Michigan does not want to see repeated today.
I remember 1981, we went to Madison ranked as the #1 team in the nation, and they knocked us off. So, but I think the most important thing for us to understand going into Madison is that this game is a championship game. If we win it, obviously we have gained at least a tie. And for Wisconsin, if they win the last 2 games, they go to the Rose Bowl.
Pasadena is where Carr and the Wolverines hope to wind up. Michigan hasn't played in the Rose Bowl since 1992. The Michigan players say the lofty ranking won't lead to big heads or a letdown against the Badgers. They insist they learned a painful lesson from last year's season-wrecking defeat at Purdue.
It still frustrates me till this day. Every game we're looking at. I mean, we're thinking about, you know, Purdue. If it was a team that we were supposed to beat, I mean, we think about Purdue. If it's a team we should beat, still think about Purdue.
I think this team knows that we're not where we want to be. There's a lot of things we still can correct, a lot of areas where we can get better. And, you know, I think it's nice to be able to be in that situation, but, you know, we're definitely not where we want to be. And if we lose, it doesn't mean anything.
The thing that we have to keep in mind is that it's a championship game, and it's going to be won on the field. You know, they don't vote you the Big Ten championship. You have to go earn it, And in this case, this week, we've got to go to Madison and play a very good football team.
The Wolverines' goals are all within reach. The Big Ten title, Rose Bowl berth, and just maybe the national title. For the Big Ten Ticket, I'm Dave Llewellyn.
Now the Wolverines arrived in Madison yesterday afternoon, as he usually does with his team. Lloyd Carr took them over to the stadium, had them walk around a little bit, check the place out. Jay Barry was there when the team got there.
The climb continues, and it doesn't get any easier. Lloyd Carr knows that here in Camp Randall Stadium, the Badgers are extremely tough. Last night, during his team's visit, he again tried to impress that on his players, guarding against even the possibility of a letdown.
The maturity factor is important, and understanding that there are no gimmies. You got to win it on the field, and I think they know that. We all expect a tough, hard-fought ball game. We expect it to go 4 quarters, and we got to be ready for that.
Believe it or not, the Badgers can go to the Rose Bowl if they beat Michigan and Penn State. Wisconsin has struggled despite its 5-1 conference record. Its only easy win came against Illinois, while it had to battle hard to beat Indiana and Minnesota.
You approach big games the same way and make sure that your players and your routine is the same, because you can't ask them to do something they can't do anyhow. All you want them to do is play their best.
They're up and down. You know, they play well sometimes. Sometimes they don't look so great, but I think they're beatable. You know, it's just a matter of how well we play and how well they play.
Last week, Barry Alvarez used letters of encouragement from his former players to spark his team. The result was an upset win over Iowa. It also pushed the Badgers into the top 25 at number 23. It's still a long way from number 1, and it's up to Michigan to show just how far it is today. In Madison for the Big Ten Ticket, I'm Jay Barry.
Thank you, Jay. The Wolverines, 15-point favorites. But Camp Randall, as you know, a tough place to play, and no one knows that more than Bo. Our weekly conversation coming up next when the Big Ten Ticket continues. Back in 1981, Michigan, preseason #1 in the nation, went to Madison and lost 21-14. The man who coached that team sits beside me here now.
Make one mistake.
Is that right?
That's the only time they beat me.
You never lost to them other than
one
game.
But it was a good lesson, because we came off of a championship season, Rose Bowl win, went up there #1 in the nation. And the late Dave McClain was coaching the team. He was a great coach. And he had that team ready, and that was a good Wisconsin team, just like the one we're playing Saturday. And they legitimately beat us.
So there is as fine an example as we can find as to why this Michigan team will go in there leery and prepared, and
now you
shouldn't say it's an automatic.
1981, but you found it.
Well, we're going to do that. You know you were going to count on us to do that, right?
Oh, yeah. I knew I'd see that play, too, that screen pass.
What worries you about Wisconsin?
Well, first of all, it's late November. ABC has chosen to put it on at 3:30, and it'll be cold. It'll be snowy. It's an artificial turf. It'll be extremely hard. And it's a Wisconsin team who legitimately, if they could win the game,
can go to the Rose Bowl.
Well, I don't know where they go to the Rose Bowl, because they lost so badly.
They can win the Big Ten.
But they can win the Big Ten.
Right.
This is going to be a old fundamental dogfight.
They have lost. They have beaten. Excuse me. They have lost to Purdue. They have beaten by a point, like Indiana and Minnesota. I mean, you look at how they've won and the scores by which they've won, and you say, "Come on, this is no big deal. This team can't beat Michigan."
You know what? I would sort of have a tendency to think like you, except I'm a coach, #1, and #2, I'm playing on the road. We're playing in Madison, Wisconsin. We are not in control of everything there, from the crowd, the field. Everything's going to be against our guys.
Now, you say you're playing in Madison.
Plus the worst locker room I've ever dressed in.
That bad, huh?
Yeah, go ahead.
But why should
That's
that?
all right, go ahead.
Why should that have anything to do with what happens on the field? You're putting your uniform on.
Because you'd like to have first-class facilities when you go ahead. I don't want to get into that.
You say Madison. Other coaches have said, I've always thought, I haven't been to Madison, but I've always thought Ohio State's like the most difficult place, the loudest place to play. But others have said, not true. That Camp Randall is the toughest place to play in the Big Ten. Is it? And why?
Well,
besides the locker rooms.
Well, I'm not talking about the locker rooms. The stadium, I don't know whether that has anything to do with it. Maybe it's because, I don't want to say this to offend anybody, maybe they drink more in these other crowds.
Oh.
You know, I don't know.
Rowdier?
A little rowdier. You know, at least the noise is high-pitched there, I guarantee you.
All right. Earlier this week, Barry Alvarez started talking about the situation with Griese being the quarterback and his dad being an analyst at ABC with Keith Jackson. They are doing the game. Now, before you talk about this, I want to play for everybody a piece of tape of Alvarez commenting on, because they've got to meet with the coaches and talk about some things.
Yes.
His feelings about meeting with Griese and Jackson and maybe saying anything about his team to Griese. Listen to this.
I know Bob Griese, and I'm sure he's as professional as it comes, but that's his son playing. And, you know, my first concern and my first responsibility is to our football team, not to ABC.
Now, there's a man who doesn't trust Bob Griese because he thinks he's going to say something to his son. What do you think?
I think he's right. Well, let's put it this way. Every time that you have these meetings, you would like to give the announcers something to look for, something they can predict, something they can hang their hat on to make them look good. Mm-hmm. You always try to do that. I would not do it if I were Barry Alvarez, because he's talking to Brian Griese's father.
Right.
And just for safekeeping. Not that I'm saying Bob Griese, because I know him.
Right.
This is a quality, fundamental value individual. But I would be real squeamish about telling them what we're going to do.
Right, so the bottom line is you don't think Griese is going to go to his son, Brian, and say, hey, look, this is what Wisconsin's going to do, and you got to be watching for that defense.
No, he's not going to do
Never
that.
happened, right?
No,
now, when you were
I promise you that wouldn't happen.
And Alvarez wouldn't do it the other way, wouldn't say some things that were not true just to kind of lead him astray and try to throw him off the scent there.
I don't think he'd do that either.
Right. Now, did you ever really talk to those guys and give them any information, or were you leery of the same kind of thing getting back to?
No, sure. I used to tell them, you know, things that we were going to try to do and what we would do in certain situations. I was an analyst once, you know.
Yes, I do.
Way back where. And I went out to say, I'll just take a minute to tell you this. Went out to Fresno State, and Jim Sweeney, the coach, told me that the first time that they punt, he says, you look for it. If they're on the right hash, I got a left-handed guy going to catch that punt and throw it clear across the field as a lateral, and we're going to score a touchdown on it.
Okay.
And so I'm all ready to be a hero as an analyst, and all of a sudden they start talking to me from the trailer. You know how they do?
Yeah.
And I went over like this to here, and the guy punted the ball, and I turned around. Just as I turned around, that guy was lateral the ball.
Oh, my gosh.
And so I missed my chance to be a great analyst.
All right, well, let's talk about this. I get this in the mail every week from Wisconsin. This is about Ron Dayne, the Great Dane, all right? It's a little Heisman kind of pumping this guy up. I get real annoyed when I get these things in the mail from all the schools. It makes me not want to vote for these guys. What do you think of stuff like this?
Did you ever get one from Michigan?
Never.
And you never will.
Right.
And I think that's because the program there is based on the team, and the team first. And any individual awards that you receive as a result of the success of the team, we're all happy.
Right.
But to promote one guy from the beginning of the season and constantly send out they send it to coaches too. Mm-hmm. And I don't believe in it. I don't think it's fair to their team to promote one player over all the others. If he's that great, we'll all know about it. But I'm like you. I kind of resent that.
All right, real quickly, an answer. Do you think Charles Woodson is the best player in the country and should win the Heisman Trophy?
Well, if
it's
they...
never gone to wide receivers, running backs,
I know, just because of that. And let me explain why. Because of the tremendous performance of the Michigan defense as a whole. I would take their best player, and if I had a vote, it'd be Charles Woodson.
Okay, I have a vote, and it'll be Charles Woodson. I don't know if he'll win, but that's who I'm going to vote for. We're back with more of the Big Ten Ticket right after this. Tiebreaker between the three. Now, this year, though, there's an additional clause in the Rose Bowl contract which states the Rose Bowl can bypass that tiebreaker system and take the higher-ranked team, which would likely be Ohio State, since they defeated the Wolverines, and therefore the Buckeyes could go to Pasadena. Michigan wins out, you don't worry about any of that stuff. Now, there is one coach in the Lions who is very interested in what the Michigan team is doing, and that's the former head coach of the Wolverines, Gary Moeller. Moeller, of course, left Michigan under difficult circumstances and now coaches the Lions linebackers. And I asked Gary about this Michigan team rising to #1 in the AP rankings.
Staff is done with this team because, you know, a lot of teams have good football players, and the key to that thing to be on the top is to put it all together. And I think the players, along with their coaches, Coach Carr and those guys, have done a great job in that way. But, yeah, I feel part of it, and I'm happy for them.
Should they beat Wisconsin, beat Ohio State, go to the Rose Bowl, stay #1, win a national championship? A lot of ifs there. But if they do, will you feel part of this national championship team if that happens for them?
Yeah, as I said, a little bit. Sure, I think everybody who's been involved with a little will, but you know, you recruit some of those kids and you get to know them, and so you always feel a part of it. And I think it's something that they can do. You go through the 3 Fs, but it's something they can do if they keep the focus that they've had so far.
You recruited a number of players who are still on that team. Tell me about Charles Woodson.
Well, Woodson, it was a funny recruit, Don, in a way, because you always wanted to come to Michigan. You knew this guy was a great player, and you can't believe, you know, this guy just wants to come. So I was really excited about that. But I always went through the scenario. Anytime a kid told you wanted to play, you're always trying to figure out, well, what could go wrong? So I thought, somebody else is trying to promise him he'll be a running back. Because he gained 2,300 yards in high school. So I said, hey, I'm going to make you a running back. He said, no, Coach, I want to be. I said, I want to make it. He said, no, I want to be a defensive back. And he was telling the truth, and he turned out to be a pretty good one.
Some people say he's going to be a high draft pick, obviously, that he's a terrific player. Could this kid come in and play for the Detroit Lions right now?
He's of that caliber, yes. And, you know, I say that more reluctantly for his point because I want him to stay focused on what he's doing. But he's got talents that's going to exceed a number of people who are playing here now at the proper time.
I know you're very close with Lloyd. Do you talk, and have you talked about, you know, what's going on right now with the team?
Well, I haven't talked to him in the last couple of weeks, but I've talked to him on a couple of occasions, and I know he's busy doing what he's doing and has to be focused that direction. And really the best thing I can do, Don, to be honest with you, is stay away from those things. You know, I don't want to be interfering in any way, but it's fun to watch them.
If you were a betting man, would you say that it's going to happen, that they're good enough and should maybe win out and win this thing?
I'm not going to bet, but I'd say that chances are well over 80% that this thing could happen, that they can control their own destiny. They can't worry about what other people are doing or who they're playing. They got to focus and control. And yet, as we all know, it's very, very difficult, no matter what time of year, what century it is, to go undefeated in a football season.
Gary Moeller, a good guy. You know, Lions players really like Gary a whole lot. He'll likely be a head coach again someday. When we come back, our weekly Tough Guy Award and a look at what is coming up next week. Stay right there. This week's Toughy Tough Guys of the Week, the Michigan offensive line. What a fabulous job they did pushing Penn State all over the field last Saturday, protecting Brian Griese and opening up huge holes for the running backs. For that, the big guys up front, who usually are not recognized for their play, are the Toughy Tough Guys of the Week. And here's our weekly top 20 poll as voted on by you. Michigan #1, followed by Florida State, Ohio State, Nebraska, Georgia, Penn State falling at #6. Then it's Tennessee, UCLA, Kansas State, and Florida. The next 10, North Carolina falls to #10, Washington and Washington State, LSU, Arizona State, Virginia Tech, Mississippi State, Auburn, Oklahoma State, and Purdue. And if you want to vote, visit our webpage at WXYZsports.com. check out the Big Ten ticket or the Sunday Sports Update, maybe ask Bo a question. You can do it all by checking out our webpage. Now, just a reminder, today's important. Michigan has to win, and they should. And then next week, huge. It's Ohio State week. The Buckeyes come to Ann Arbor, ranked in the top 5. Michigan has ruined their season the last few years. I'll have the pregame show with Bo live from Michigan Stadium at 11:30. They kick off. The Wolverines and the Buckeyes is at noon. All of it right here on Channel 7. That's it for this week's show. Coming up next, it's Illinois and Ohio State. That's a blowout. And then Michigan at Wisconsin. Thanks for watching. I hope to see you next week. Enjoy both football games, everyone.